a most amazing way of getting onto a talk so we can see Angel. We are here, aren't we, Angel?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we've had to do it a bit weirdly, but we've got Angel now on a screen. I can't get my camera off one, and I'm on the other one. One to film it, one so we can hear it. But anyway, Angel got in touch with me massively the other day. He says, I've got it. He reckons that he's come across a bit of information which shows that he's right. Go for it, Angel.
Okay. Now you have a computer there. You can do some Googling for me.
What do you mean?
Can you just? I'm just interested if there's a Latin, what the Latin derivative of a tar is, like TAR, if it means something in Latin. Because I was just thinking of it while you're doing that.
Oh, go on then, do that bit then. Keep everybody in suspense.
Well, no, just can you Google it?
Oh, you want me to Google it? But I'm on the phone.
All right, then you can't.
Hang on.
I thought you had a computer there. Sorry, it's all right. It's all right. We don't have to.
I am. I'm on the computer and I'm on my phone to talk to you on the computer to film it.
I have a computer here too. I can probably do it myself instead of asking you. But have you gotten an answer yet?
Look that up, you know. I don't really like Tartarian anymore because it's in Lutheritarian, it's in Totalitarian, it's in all sorts of words, and it's their game. So
Tarian.
I'm not sure.
Tarian means to control, right?
Ah, there you go.
Is that what? That's what I'm asking you. The Latin derivative of tar is from Tartarian, to control. That actually works out perfect. Are you ready? Say yes.
I'm ready.
I'm going to throw a lot at you quickly, and I'm going to backpedal later, just that I want to get it out. First off, today we use a circle. When we do a circle, we separate a circle, and usually to 360 degrees. Why? Just because we've done that forever. We'll get to that later. Second, let's also touch upon in mechanical things, we separate a circle into 400 what they call gradients instead of degrees. Can we agree upon this? It's a true thing. In fact, I will suggest to you that on that mindset, when they developed the meter, was to divide this circle into 4,000 units. However, they messed up, and we can get into how they conceived of the meter, put a meter on a piece of titanium, made a wavelength for it, used that to measure the area they thought, and they realized they made a mistake in their calculation, and instead of correcting their calculation, they just perpetuated the mistake. And because of that perpetuation of the mistake, things don't click, but they will when I show you what's going on.
Can I just say something? Can you read your t-shirt out?
My t-shirt says, go ahead, read it.
I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you.
Perfect. Now, I can explain it to you, but I need you to understand this. Now, here we go. Now, in a normal everyday, we calculate a day into 24 hours, right? 24 hours, 60 minutes, 60 seconds. We're going to accept this as a given, and it's been that way for a really long time, and we don't know why, but we'll get to that too. In this circle, we calculate a year in 365 days, and we're going to talk about the points here in a second. I'm going to suggest to you, and it is actually concreted in the Antikythera mechanism, but we'll get to that, that at a point in history, somebody somewhere decided to use 0.222, 365.222 days as their cycle. Now, if you take that number and the one we use today is like 2242, if you multiply that out, we'd have to wait 1,000 years for that number to become a nice number because they throw the 4 in there. But if you take this number, you can multiply that by 500, and I thought I had the number written down here, so I got my calculator. It's easy. 365,222 times 500 years. It comes out to be a nice clean number of 182611000. I'm going to suggest to you, hear me now and believe me later, that this is what I want to call the long year. Okay? That many days in one long year. Now, Let's also take, given that the Earth is, well, 2,409.01 miles. Now we're going to say that. Now let's take that number and we multiply 24,901.5 times 500 years, and we get another number, 12450,750. It will be that many miles in 500 years of. Now I'm going to suggest to you, and this is why your audience will accept this better than anybody else, and so would Dave, the Flat Earth Dave. It's that many miles in movement of the sun around the given point of the pole star, aka above the North Pole. Now here's where you have to look at this in the way the Antikythera mechanism does, where it's a pole with a bunch of gears and a bunch of gears out here that move gears back and forth, training a set of mechanisms that are on the dial. It's all in one pole, all off the center pole. And this is where this math is going to come into play. Because if we use 365,222, and this is where I'd like you and your audience to do this. In fact, I'll probably do it where you can see this. Can you see that screen? 365,222 times 360 degrees. Now this is going to give us, in reference to this 222 number, 360 degrees, a marking on every spot where we can judge on any given day, exactly on any given day of any given year, exactly where the sun is, to perfect precision using this particular calculation. Sorry, not that calculation. Using, I'm going to hit the equal sign here, equals 131,479,920. That many divisions along the circumference of, I'm going to suggest to you, the equator. Okay, does that number look familiar? It may not just yet, but if I divide that number by 5280, does that number look familiar?
No, tell me, what is it?
How many miles is the circumference of the Earth?
Oh, 24,900.
And 1.5.
Right.
It's not clicking. That is a perfect delineation
Of the circumference of the Earth, you mean?
Of the circumference of the Earth. We have divided the circumference of the Earth into a number, which is a mathematical equation, which will give us exactly that many points on its marking of 131,479,920 positions. If you ask Google what is the circumference of the Earth, it's going to give you an answer that ends in something in 700 feet. And I'm going to suggest to you they get that calculation because they took they used it, measuring it with the meter, because they used the radio wave instead of a tape measure to measure the circumference of the Earth, of the equator. And they used that off the meter, which we already discussed how the meter is slightly off. If I didn't discuss it, when they went from the equator to the pole, after I discussed it while we were off. We decided when we developed the meter to take a division between the equator and the pole and divide it into 10 billion segments, aka the meter. Right now it's 10,000 kilometers. However, because they developed the length, put it on a piece of tungsten steel, developed a wavelength to equal that length, used that wavelength to measure it, and realized that they have a number of 10,001.7, if you ask Google, that's what it says, kilometers between the equator and the pole. So they were 1.7 10 thousandths off. Did they take the time to etch a little mark 1 10 billionth, 1.7 10 billionths longer, and change the radio wave to say, hey, this is the actual thing, we made a mistake when we developed the meter a couple of decades ago? No. they've perpetuated the mistake and continued. When you perpetuate the mistake, you're never going to get the right answer. However, if they had done that, then the length of the meter would be a tiny bit smaller, which means there'd be a tiny bit more of them. And then when you translated that to the foot, you'd get a tiny bit more of them. And I suggest you're going to get about 200 additional ones of them, because my number is a number based off the Antikythera mechanism, which has been proven to be more accurate than many of the star calculating software you can get. And in 2024, it was shown more accurate than NASA when it suggested the way the shadow would traverse the surface of the moon. So I trust the Antikythera mechanism, a mechanical device, more than I trust NASA, who will charge you $9,000 and ship you an empty hard drive full of garbage.
So do
Let
I.
me continue, because there's more to this. Now, when we decided to do the meter, we really were focusing that off this. And this is where this comes in, and I'm going to show you this. You take your Earth and you divide it into 24 hours, and then you take that, and this is all math, so anyone can follow along. You take 24 hours, you multiply it by 60 minutes, you multiply that by 60 seconds. There are that many seconds in the day. Everyone agrees on that? That number is 86,400. Okay? Now I'm going to suggest to you that we take that number and we multiply it by 8,000. Now you could say it's because the Schumann residency is 8 hertz, but we'll get into that in a bit. We multiply that by 8,000. And that number, I'm not going to bother to type it out, but just work with me. What that's going to do is, for every second of the day, there is 8,000 marks within the second, which means that as the sun moves across, if we're looking at this as the equator, as the sun moves across the surface, in 1 second, there are 8,000 divisions. Now, for today's terminology, I'm going to call each one of those divisions a tar. And if we look at those divisions, when you do a mathematical calculator and you all the dice falls, you know that the mileage of the Earth, we know how many feet the Earth is, so we can do a translation. Oh, and this is where...
Angel, can I say one thing?
Yes.
You know, when I sit here looking east, I've sat up many a day making videos, and the sun comes really early in the summer and all that. But I told people that it's like I put a semicircle of, the compass and that, when you get your kit and you get a semicircle in there, and it's got those little ridges in it. If I stuck that on my window, the sun is coming up each one of those ridges every day and goes across north.
Yes.
And it starts going back. So it's the same thing like that's how I would explain it. But carry on.
Well, I'm showing you the math.
Yeah,
Well,
go.
And let me ask this. Did you see the Globy guys last Sunday?
No.
Well, when you do, they show you that at any point, your view is askewed, just like you were saying. And when we get into, as I get deeper into this, Karen, you're going to see how the numbers, they work backwards and forwards. When I say they work backwards and forwards, we have 12 hours in the day going to 60 minutes. So you're taking the minutes and as a power of 12. But then we also take the foot, which I'm telling you is one of the key measurements. This number right here is one of the key measurements. And we divide that by 12 to get 12 inches. So during the day, you also have the breakdown that equal each other on the smaller scale. That is the inverse of it. And really, you should see the Globy guys thing last Sunday, because they work in concert. Well, that's all I have to say. You got to watch theirs. They speak it a lot better, but the math is working out where, as the light comes through, it refracts it one way, and then we refract it the other. And we have to know the level of refraction based on the time of day, which is why this breaks down so perfectly. And all these measurements can only be done at noon. Honestly, when this thing locks, it all, oh, I didn't get to the measurements. The speed of the sun going across the equator, we say 1 second is 8,000 parsecs, or in this case, I'm going to call it a tar. And when you break that down, it comes out to be about 17.18 something, something, something inches per, I'm sorry, units, tars, per 8,000ths of a second. This is just math. However, what I'm going to show you, and this is what's important, is 8,000 is the same thing as 60. 8,000 units in this one arc second, 8,000 units in this one arc second, and we're going to call them tars, is going to marry 60ths of a second, but it only marries it because of how you break down prime numbers every 1/20th of a unit. Every 1/20th of 60 is 3, so it would be 3 feet. So every 3 feet is equivalent to 20, sorry, 1/20th of this is 40. 40 is equivalent to 40 of this unit, which we're going to call a tar. So every third unit is a qubit. Q, when you look at it in Latin, Q means to control. Qubit. Every third unit is a qubit because it syncs the two different measurements together, and it'll only happen every 3/60ths of every second and every 40 tars. Now I'm using the word tar instead of bit because we use the word qubit because those ones Q it together every 3 segments or every 3 feet across the surface of the equator. This is where your cubit and your foot, when you look at it on the calculator, you do the 17 times 3 and the 3 feet. Wow, it almost perfectly marries up. Well, it would perfectly marry up if A, we use the right length for the foot, and B, because we made the division. We made the math. I made the math. So that it will definitely join up mathematically. It definitely cues together. Every third foot is a qubit. These words kind of make sense. And when you look up the length of the cubit, they've got the royal cubit, this and this. Now, this is where, when you take from the equator to the pole, you will notice your arc seconds in length of time become smaller as you get to the North Pole. AKA, your qubits are closer together. Now, why did I use the word hectare? And why did I make you look up hectare? And why did I call these a tar? Because we have a length of measurement called a hectare. Hec is 100. Tar is the unit of measurement I just threw at you. Every 100 hectares is, well, we can do the math. We know the length. And this only works at the equator as far as getting the relationship of the size. And if we square that, if we square those 100 hectares, 100 bits, each bit being 17-ish inches, you do that and you square it, you come up with a number which is within 8% of what Google says a hectare is when it says it's approximately blank. So now your viewers, comprehend how we got the foot. We didn't talk about the 360 yet. We'll get into that. And I didn't tell you the origin of the mile. We're going to work with that because that's pretty wonderful. The mile. Let's get into the mile.
Can I just say one thing? I'm sorry. I'm
Go
butting
ahead.
in.
I got the flow, but go ahead.
You know, when you explained about how it's bigger on the outside and the qubits are closer in the middle, That's why the Gleason map don't work.
I'll agree with you, but
Carry on. No, carry on. The mile. Oh, doggy! I heard a doggy.
but this map does. So does this map, and so does this map, and so does that map. So you understand when you look at these alternative maps how these numbers work out so perfect. So now what I was getting about is to Q, we need to also have a joint measure between these two numbers. And because of that, and we know that we have every 40 bits is about or is exactly every 3 bits. So if we wanted to have a number there, we multiply those together. So 40 times 3. Now, the other thing we need to know is how in the Antikythera mechanism, there are a bunch of gears. One of the gears is a prime number gear 11. And that one works in there because when these gears are working, one of the gears involved is an 11. So we multiply that by 11. And you get a number that is 1320. That doesn't mean very much. But remember, this is divided into 4 or multiplied by 4. So actually just take that number and multiply it by 4. And what do you get?
5,280.
Okay. So let me talk to you about the 360 because then you'll understand why we multiplied it by 4. Break 360 into its prime numbers. And I got to tell you about gearing. Gearing is great. Go really quick. If I wanted to throw a prime number in a gearing mechanism, and I wanted to throw an 11 in there, that would be a really tight gear. But if I threw a 11 in there, and then I threw a 2 on top of it to make it 22 holes, 22 pins, that gear is a little bit better for meshing. So what we can do is whenever we need to stick a prime number somewhere, we can throw a 2 or a 3 on top of it. Well, we don't want to use a 3 because a 3 does something else. The 3 interlocks with this. Everywhere in all of our measurements that we have, the mile, the everything, if there is a 3 broken down into its prime numbers, it is calculating the qubits, and it is doing that. It is measuring time. They were using, if you put sticks in the ground when it goes up, they were using the sun to make measurements, and that is why this works. These numbers work in flow with the movement of the sun. And
when did they make this?
The qubits will work at any elevation. That's why the qubit is so special, because it will work at any elevation.
When did they make this, Angel?
When? Long enough ago that we've been using 360, 400, an approximation of this, and this number, the length of the foot. How long have we been using the foot as a length of a foot? Because when we decided to make the foot the length of the foot, is who did this? Because whoever developed this, they set in standard the length of the foot. I didn't back engineer the foot and multiply it together and see what numbers fit. Based on all the numbers and everything you can dig up, they used this calculation as a year. That calculation of a year times 360 hits a number which is so dang close to the foot, I have no choice but to believe that is the foot, and the number we have is 131,479 billionths off, just like the calculation of the meter is off, because if we defined the meter as this length, and then we said this portion of it is 1/10 billionth, and then we add it all together, we're off. We made a mistake. And instead of correcting our mistake, we perpetuate the lie. And because of that, because we do that, if the meter was the meter, then the distance between the pole and the equator would fall where every 3 meters would be equivalent to 40 feet. Exactly.
So what does that mean? So
penny.
it's basically saying that we're bigger than we are anyway.
Now, I'm not saying size. We're talking the difference in size is not very big. The Earth is the Earth, is the Earth, is the Earth. I can't change the Earth. What I'm saying is the units of measurement we are using are a tiny bit off from what they need to be. Just like when you're working with symmetrics, the bit where you put water in the thing and play noise and stuff, if we're off a little bit by the frequency, the water won't have the same patterns. If you're off a tiny bit of a hertz, you won't get the equivalent result if you're right on. When the lady sings C sharp and the crystal cracks, if she doesn't sing C sharp perfectly, the crystal does not crack. It's resonance.
Does that mean that if it was in time with each other, the waves would be different?
Things would marry. Like if I gave you a watch that was 2 minutes off, every day at noon, the sun would be in a different spot.
Right.
You don't see the symmetry if you're using the wrong measurement.
So why did they do that? To cover up years or make years?
Well, we could go with a bit of conspiracy, a tiny bit of conspiracy here. Okay?
Identify as a conspiracy theorist. My pronouns are I told you so. I like that one, Angel.
All right. So we can assume at some point in the past they had this unit of measurement and they just worked with it and they have no idea where it is. As Graham Hancock says, we are a civilization in amnesia. Now, I want to throw something.
Can I tell you something? If you're using your senses in the sky and all those things, and you want to, you're constantly out. So you can never sort yourself out properly if you want to live like that, because you can't do it because you're out. Do you see what I mean? You can never get into harmony because you're out.
I'll go with that one. However, this is a lot nicer. Let me show you what we as current day civilization does. If we are the Antikythera mechanism, instead of measuring everything off the center core spindle. Oh, I was going to get to you why you have those numbers. When we break down the gears in the Antikythera mechanism, you see a lot of prime numbers there. You see them?
Right.
Bunch of prime numbers. Now, what this means is when spindle A and spindle B are working together, if everything is prime numbers, things are going to marry constantly, okay? Things are going to work in symmetry, like it would if we were on one of those spider rides where you have, here, I got it. No, but I want your viewers to get me. If we're on one of these spider rides and you got the three arms coming out and you got the gear in the center, okay? And then each one of these has three things on it, and these are your seats, okay? What we want to do is we want Granny out here to actually be on a bench. So we're going to put a gear with bigger numbers. But Granny gets upset because she only gets to see her kid every fourth time around. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw an extra pin or two, or 3, or 5, because we like prime numbers down the road. But when it does that, it's going to offset it by 3 or 5. Now, I'll point out to you now, and you can do the math later. The number 5 is nice because you can take 12 hours and multiply it to 60 minutes by using a 5 gear. And I already told you how by using the 3 gear, or the 3 prime number, we can use that to get in sync with our tars. So the qubits will, because at that point, the tars, qubits are 1/3. Every third qubit every third tar is a qubit, because it is what comes in sync between the feet and the speed of light. The speed of light as it traverses the surface. That is the mesh. And you will see in the gearing system a bunch of 3s and 5s. And you will see in the gearing system, you don't see 3s and 5s in these gears. You just see an 11. Oh, I was getting to them. Oh, well, you're talking about the 11. Because the 11 is the gearing system that goes to the planetary movement, the sun, the earth, and the moon.
Does that mean they're moving our time on then?
Well, when we want to go back to conspiracy, think of these people back in the 1500s when they sat there and decided how to calculate time. They sat there in a room and decided how to calculate time. Number one, I'm going to suggest you heartily that the prime meridian, in order for all of this clicks even more. In fact, locations upon the earth seem to have much more meaning, both mathematically and the rationale for the location, if we make the prime meridian this purple rock right here instead of the front door of the museum in England. If we do that, things will fall in line. Just since this is my calculation, I am saying my prime meridian, my zero mark, not just because I love the pyramid, this is how the math works.
What you're saying is they used this when they made the pyramids.
The foot was in measure. Now, I also want to tell you, inside the structure, they have denoted, they being, the people of great wisdom, have denoted use of the cubit, and I feel at certain points they actually use the cubit correctly, because anytime you see the cubit, which is usually in the niche in the Queen's chamber and in other areas, it is where a reaction of occurring that I'm going to suggest to you, as I have from the beginning, that there's actually a spark coming from a driplet of water in there. And the cubit is showing motion of time, the speed of light. It is suggesting that is where that spark is coming from. And they're trying to pinpoint that because they're using the cubit, which is the speed of the sun traversing the earth, where the foot is used in many spots. And that is used because they're just using it for measurements as it was designed and measured to do. So I have no problem using, now that I know the meter is actually derived or should be from the same system, and we're just, by having our meter slightly off, things don't fall in Q. They won't Q because we're using the wrong measurements.
Yeah.
We're off by 1/bazillionth of an inch. We're off by, 1.7 10,000ths of a millimeter. But because we're off, things don't fall in line. They don't cue. These words that we have been using ever since before I was born. These are the reasons in Latin, the origin of them, right here in math. Oh, I didn't get to why we like the mile. The mile is the cue for the aperture of the rotation of our aperture, the Earth, the one that is the 11. It has the 11 prime number in it. And the one that has the 3 is the one that is the speed as it traverses. It's the one that technically, it's our difference. It houses the sun. We're on the 11, it's on the 3, but you have to use that math, which is why we use the mile. So that at any point, at any time, we can use the sun where it is and use that and other celestial bodies when you get into it. This is just our arm. That is the difference between our arm that we are on, or the spindle, the thing, and the other celestial bodies.
How do they keep that sun there if it's slightly out every time it clicks on? How do they keep everything?
The sun will be still moving. If you have a watch that's 2 minutes off, it will still be rotating. The sun is still doing its thing. We just don't see the symmetry because we're not calculating time properly, and we, in long term, in big term, and to take a quick step back, you know how everyone says, what's your rising sign? What's your sign when you were born? What was in the sky and what were the things? If we properly calculated and knew how to backtrack, because this is all math, it's all gears, it's all math, it can be done. And how to use what celestial bodies were where in the sky, you could tell somebody's time of birth, not based on our Roman Catholic thing, but based on the movements of the celestial bodies. And since they only reset once every 500 years, other than the people who are lucky enough to see Halley's Comet twice, very few people are going to live the 500 years. And that really doesn't totally matter because this is only the circular cycle of the Earth. And to be honest with you, the other number, the 5280, the miles, it actually resets once every 250 years. So the celestial bodies on its apertures is doing its thing every 250 years, but we have to have two rotations of it in comparison to the Earth's long year before everything resets. And even then, because of the lunar cycle, and I don't have to make it up, it's 233 cycles. When you multiply that in, when everything resets at this time 500 years from now, the celestial bodies haven't reset. So we have to go another 500 years and another 500 years and another 500 years until they reset. And that's the math I'm working on based on what celestial bodies are on what aperture, because that's going to be your grand year that they talk about, that, everyone says it's about 5,600 years or whatever it is. The math will give me the exact precise answer. Now, what I was getting at with Granny, if Granny is here on this spindle, and she is calculating where her grandson is on this particular device. And we can look at this as they each come up and you're looking down at it, or it's optically a little bit easier to understand when we do it this way. But Granny is doing all her measurements based off of her on where her grandson is. This is how NASA is calculating things. They are calculating things by using one of the moving bodies instead of the fixed shaft. So while things work out, you're working with a moving target. And you can easily, on any math equation, move variables around. But that's why we have a leap year, not a leap year every 4, a leap year every 100, not every 400, every 1,000, not every 4,000. We keep doing that because we're ping-ponging back and forth to keep in symmetry with time, when if we just kept in symmetry with time, we wouldn't have to ping-pong back and forth. Now,
Can
you
I
are
ask you
going to have to give me a
something?
break because my dog has to go out. So hold your
Can I
thought.
just ask you this before we
Well,
stop?
I can
How
take
many
you
years?
with me. I can take you with me.
How many years do you think that's added to our time?
Well, that's where I was getting at with the starting of time. Number one, we've skewed the start date. The start date is when the sun is coming down in the ecliptic, when people want to stand the egg on its end on Ishtar Day, the day that people were told, oh, you can't celebrate New Year's on that day, don't be a April Fool's person, because that is the start calendar time if we have to backdate things. So we use the wrong solstice. The nice people at the time, they did it over there in the Roman Catholics in the 1500s. Now, you can't blame them because the guy before him, Constantine, kind of messed things up. It was the Gregorian guy that put in cement. But we moved New Year's, the start date, and we have skewed the way we calculate it. And in addition to that, what else was it? Oh,
Don't go
well,
too
they
far
like,
because we'll lose connection.
I should get cell. It should jump from my Wi-Fi to my cell, but I do have to
Okay.
stay. I do have to keep my puppy in sight.
He says, I'm not going.
Well, he's watering the grass right there.
Oh, is he?
His dangling parcipitable. I can't say it. Dangling parcipitable. You know the thing you leave dangling at the end of a word is a vocabulary. The word isn't coming to me. Participle. Dangling participle.
Okay.
Anyway, so you can see, and I'm showing you in math, how these terms that we use, I don't know how many people actually get hectares of land anymore, but it is a acceptable term. And I can show you mathematically within, 8/10 of a percentage point that either I'm correct or they're guessing. Because, I can show you because it is 100 tars, 100 of those bits, 100 of those 8 thousandths of a second. 100 of them, which would be 1/4 of, what would that be? Well, it doesn't matter. It is a length of measurement, and it can be done without a ruler. You could do it with using the sun, is what I'm suggesting to you. And the math works out. The size agrees with what I'm suggesting its origin was. And I think, as Graham Hancock really suggests, we are a civilization that doesn't comprehend where we came from. We woke up, we're working with these numbers, we're working with 24. Oh, I didn't. When you get into the spindles, when you're going back and forth between the center spindle and the other one, I told you every now and then you want to use a 13 or an 11 or a 5, but you can't, a gear with 5 pins on it won't work right. So you actually have to make that gear, instead of being 5, have it be 10 or 20. So it's a multiple of 2. So you keep multiplying and adding 2s in here and 2s in there, because you need it to get the pin count up. And when you look at the number 360, it is a lot of 2s. And when you look at the 540, 5240, the mile, it has the 11 in it and a bunch of 2s. And those 2s, I'm going to suggest to you, have to be in there as it traverses back and forth in the gearing system in the Antikythera mechanism. And again, I did not calculate 360. Somebody else came with that long before I was born. The grid thing, long before I was born. Foot, long before I was born. All these numbers, all these equations were made long before I was born. So I'm just showing you the math of how they were created, where they were created from. We are a civilization in amnesia, and we could teach people the right information. But I'm sure the Roman Catholic Church is probably going to be very upset at me, because it's very, very, very hard to dispute everything I'm saying, because it all honestly makes sense. The Q bit is the third tar in everything. It cues with the everything, it cues together. It is the Q bit, and it is a term that has been used forever, and it shows that they were using time to measure distance at different elevations. That's why the Q bit is smaller as you go further towards the North Pole. And the royal one, they say the royal one, and in my calculations, is actually 2 tars, so it's not technically a qubit. Again, I think they threw that in there because people in the Roman Catholic, in conclave, while they were over there saying it, they said, look, we know the qubit is actually every 3rd tar. We know this, but we can't let the general population know this. Otherwise, they might figure out that we're divinely created with intelligent design, instead of willy-nilly flying around, going in circles in the middle of nowhere in outer space.
Hear, hear, Angel. Hear, hear. Sorry, I had to give you a clap then.
Well, I thank you. So, how far off my rocker do you think I am?
Can I just say something? Right. So you've explained that in a very mathematical term. But for those of us who aren't so clever, is there just a couple of sentences you can say it without all the maths that people get if they haven't got it already?
The units of
Very
measurement.
in depth.
The units of measurement we are using today can be justified and recreated using what I feel is the correct way to calculate time, as well as, to be honest with you, the ChatGPT thing agrees with me as well. In fact, here's something I'd like all of your listeners to do. Ask your favorite AI if 1277, I didn't even get to that number. 1277 is a prime number because it keeps flip-flopping. 1277 is what I'm going to call the grand year gear. If you take 365, 222, and you divide it by 1277, and this is where, again, math doesn't lie. 365, 222 divided by 1277, which I'm going to suggest to you is the grand year gear in the Antikythera mechanism. You get 268. Now that has a lot of 2s in it. Why?
286.
Right, 286, which has a lot of twos in it. I think there's another number hiding in there. Hang on, a two. Oh, no, it doesn't have a two. Times 2. It's got a what was it? 286. It's got a 3 then. A 3. Yes. No. Hey, what's the prime of 286? What the heck is it? It can't be that hard. It's a actually I have it written down somewhere. It's not coming to me right now, but that number, it has to break down into a 2. It ends in a 6. Divide by 2. Oh, yeah, is 143. Do you recognize that? That is 11 times 13. Two of the lower prime numbers within the thing. So your main gear is a 1277 teeth. The other gears that interface are 11 and 13 and a 2. Those are all the numbers it takes to come to the number 1277 times 13 teeth in the one gear times 11 teeth in the other gear times 2, because you have to probably throw a 2 in the 11 gear, comes up with 365222. The math doesn't lie. That number has to be there because it's a gearing system. It's all gears intertwining together, as the Antikythera device tells us. I really kind of think that our solar system, as we want to call it, is a large planetarium that is kind of like they have in the dark crystal and identically geared to the Antikythera mechanism. End of story. Mic drop.
Wow. So what does that mean for the pyramids then?
Oh, well, all that means is that when I'm trying to show communication down the road, when I'm trying to suggest to you that there's a lot of communication within it, in areas where everything is X number of feet and inches, they're measuring it in feet and inches. In areas where they want to show movement of electricity or reactions over time, they throw a qubit in there, and how many of them are showing what they're doing. In fact, I will suggest to you, as we pick apart the computer, the pyramid system, as the pressures are shown, and CAD will echo what the pressures will and are, that you will see that there are markings within the structure that will echo that. Just like Chris Dunn points out that the conduit coming out of the side of the king's chamber that goes up to the shaft that doesn't pierce the skin. This one,
There it
it
is.
is, it is 7.121 whatever centimeters and whatever height, 21 something in height. And I suggest to you centimeters. Centimeters are based off the 400 unit number, the grid, because the 400 meters are actually, if they had done the math right, are the derivative of bits around the outside. So 400 meters are actually like 4,000 bits or qubits, or I'd have to. The meter, they're directly in interchangeable if we had the meter correctly, because the meter should be 40,000 kilometers, should be 40,000 units around the outside, or 4 billion units around the outside. Instead, we have it as 4 billion and 17 because we're 17 because we mismeasured it. And we like to stick with the lie. And if it worked, the mile and the kilometer would cue in sync because they're both based off of the same overall circumference. They should be, if we had done it right, both based off the same circumference. And they want to lie to you and tell us it's wider at the equator and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. That's great. because since we know how the Earth is truly shaped, if it was wider at the equator, we could just pull the equator in, because probably they did the math of when it transverses over the quote equator, and we didn't, and we might be actually calculating the wrong thing, because I think they are more correct than we are. That's all I have to say. They are more correct than we are. However, we have to, I can't really speed and tell the officer, well, your chronological is set to the wrong speed and, blah, 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 because of math and the sun and the earth. And, they're going to say, here's the speeding ticket, tell it to the judge. But
well, of course, they don't want you to even know it, do they?
Right. But when we get down to, honestly, the Fermi scale, one, what is that, 1/10,000th of a second or whatever, firmamener, that the wavelengths do matter, because certain numbers are much easier to calculate if we're doing it right. And I also think that the reason, and you can hear me now and think about it later, that the Schumann resonance is around 8 hertz probably is the reason why they divided the segments of each arc second into 8,000 at the equator.
How did you put all this together then, Angel?
I looked at the math, Karen. I looked at the math of the Antikythera mechanism, and some things fell into place. And as they started to fall into place, and as I recognized it, as I visualized it, as things turning around each other within the shafts of the Antikythera mechanism, I then broke it out mentally into this sort of a spindle. And you can see how Grandma over here, she can still do all the calculations, because they're all gears. They're all finite numbers. They're not random variables like they want to tell us in space, where something is wobbling. You know how they say they found a planet because something was wobbling. So let's use their same math. When Grandma here is doing the calculation of when she'll see her grandson, she can back gear all these numbers to get it, and base that number off of her being the stationary object, and have this whole thing revolving around her. If it was a moving mechanism and we just grabbed this but let it still spin, it will still spin.
So basically like a gyroscope, really.
Yeah, kind of. I'm trying to, if I had one, like well, I'll find one down the road, but you can just mentally picture you grabbing Grandma and letting the rest of the mechanism move, where this whole thing moves around Grandma instead of Grandma moving around the center. And you can mathematically say when the kid is going to be over here, kind of like a kaleidoscope. You can mathematically figure it out. But this math is much harder than this math. And this math within this math. And if this is the North Pole and everything, all the mechanisms are moving around it at the gear system that the Antikythera mechanism suggests, we can totally calculate any position of anything very accurately, depending on whether it's on the aperture moving at the speed of the sun. It's on the same aperture in relation to, we're actually on that aperture, but in relation to us, the other aperture is moving at that speed. And when you take the speed of us compared to the speed of them, that is the mile, because we need to cue it.
Is this why our seasons are out?
Well, that's another thing that will happen, since we calculate time a little bit differently, and this is why I think in 1500 they redid the calendar, because Christmas is supposed to fall on the winter solstice. But since we calculate it wrong, it was migrating. And even today, Easter doesn't fall on Ishtar Day, and the winter solstice doesn't fall on Christmas, and even Hanukkah or whatever it is, which is supposed to start based on celestial events, isn't falling on the right days, because we are slightly calculating things off. And that's the other thing, is if we're doing the zero time differently, we don't really have a way to know. So we may, as time goes, the face of our clock may be moving. Here we go. the face of our clock may be moving because we don't have numbers on it, because we don't base it on a backdrop of the fixed stars. We think the fixed stars are a moving target instead of a stationary target. So our clock may be turning a bit each time, where when we think it's actually 12, it's actually 1. But we don't know because we're not backing it on the fixed stars. We're using NASA's suggestion because we think the fixed stars aren't stationary. So yes, we could be, quote, losing time or gaining time. I think technically the solstices are coming early, so I guess we'd be technically losing
Yes.
time.
I think, they've changed a couple of days, haven't they? They're a couple of days earlier now.
Right. That's because things like the winter solstice and the summer solstice, those are based on when the sun does the sun's thing. You can't, no matter what somebody says, if I walk outside and it's 80 degrees and they tell me it's winter, and 6 months later it's 42 degrees and they tell me it's summer, I'm going to tell them I'm not in Australia, bud.
Mm.
But because we get our time and we get our date and we don't question it from this little black mirror, this little black mirror here, we don't think about it and we don't care. No one except for me cares about this. Well, and honestly, I think Solar Dave, Flat Earth Dave, once he gets us out of this, I'd really like to consider him updating his Earth clock because he can probably make it more accurate using these more accurate numbers.
Oh,
Not
you
only
mean
that,
Dave Wise?
yes, yes, yes. I mean Dave Weiss. Not only that, but me myself, instead of calling something a foot anymore, I'm going to start using the things. If I'm going to do 100 feet, I'm going to do 100 with a caret because, in my opinion, these are now pyramid feet, and they're 131 479 200ths of an inch off of the inch. But I think my foot, my pyramid foot, is more accurate. And because it's 131 400, sorry, 200 131 479 thousandths of an inch off, if I'm not building something really really big, I'm just going to use my little yard measurement and I'll be okay with the 200 131 480 billionths of the inch being off on the small scale.
You know what, though? I mean, a lot of us think that they make the weather to change what's going
Well,
on, like
well
millions of clouds. But
we
why
don't
go
have
to
to
all
think.
that effort of doing that to us?
We don't have to think. We know that been doing cloud seeding. We know that they use HARP. We know that they, over in England, over in the UK over there during the Olympics like a decade ago, they had those big, they looked like long can antennas that were beaming frequencies out there, which I believe, I would tell you now, and you can believe me later, we're using the Rife technology, which I'm going to suggest to you when we get into what the pyramid does. They send a frequency. Everything vibrates at a frequency. Tesla was right. Everything has frequency, force, and energy, whatever it is. Now, I happen to call it, when I'm working with the pyramid, the resident ambient frequency and force. What I mean, I'm suggesting to you that within the system is a lesser, it is the gases are condensing, so
Oh,
you actually have a slight um, vacuum, and the waters down here are actually under pressure. And when you take into account the pressures and where energy wants to go, how pressure wants to relieve itself, is really working with what the system is doing. And in here, I believe they're setting up the right frequency by tuning it using this.
Angel, we're running out of time.
That's fine. I'm pretty much at a point anyway. Unless you want to restart this, give me a 15-minute break and we can actually start talking about the pyramid because we haven't even gotten there yet. Believe me, if you believe what I'm telling you about the clocks, I've got a pile of rocks to sell you. And I love this pile of rocks.
We'll do one
Okay?
more hour because I've got to go out. I've got to go out this afternoon. But
No problem.
but
Where's Jimbo?
you have to set it up. Oh, he's tidying the house up so I can go over there. Um, you need to set a new link. I don't think we can get back in this link.
No, I will set a new link, but it won't let me do it for 15 minutes. So when this time's out, you got to give me 15 minutes to wash, shower,
Would you
shave.
want me to make one?
You can do that. We do, but still give me time to go get some. I gotta get a drink. I gotta get it bubble a little bit.
Okay.
All right, and
2, 1. We have Angel back, and he's wearing a new hat. Oh, and a t-shirt.
yes, this is my hard hat because we're doing construction, and
Oh,
this is the periodical table, so I can reference it. It's a lot easier to reference when I'm wearing it. So
right.
let's start.
Part 2. What's it called?
Well, the first one, rhythm of time, because honestly, the anti-terror mechanism shows that we have a rhythm to time. And I should have taken the time to erase the whiteboard, but I didn't. We'll get to that later.
What's part
This,
2 called?
huh?
What's part 2 called?
Well, it's just the pyramid. I don't care what you call it. You know. Well, I tell you, did you see the YouTube video that I had sent you that what the history and granite guy put out a month ago?
Actually, I was looking for that today to watch it because I know that you wanted me to watch it, but you
I
must
sent
have
you.
been.
Look at the way beginning of our conversation, and then look an hour earlier.
Okay.
I sent you the link this morning because I realized I hadn't sent it to you. And
I
actually,
don't remember seeing it.
it's easy. Yeah, actually, you did say it, but you didn't realize it. If you go
Oh,
to
you mean that picture? I saw the picture.
if you go to any web browser and type in pressure.greatgizapyramid.com, I thought this video was so important I gave it its own link. Pressure.greatgizapyramid.com. And it will bring you to History of Granite's YouTube video, at least until he takes it down. And since I already have a copy of it, I'll just put it up on my page under a private link. But it shows images that somebody recently released where they realized that right up in here, there is an opening about 2 inches wide that goes up into the cavity, and that there is, and here's where I do stand corrected, as far as when they were talking about the less dense area up here and the less dense area over here. Well, without cussing, believe you not, there is, and the pictures are in the link. And by now, I'm hoping you might be looking at them because I'm going to ask you to take some still shots from them, because they're gonna reference more. And honestly, this was the perfect timing because I was in the middle of trying to figure out how this was done as a gate, how this was done as a switch, and that room opened up many things. If you look at the room and how it's constructed, and I'm going to draw it quickly and not as accurate as it has. You've got a room that goes back, up, and goes like that. On the outside, this right here is where the chevron thingy is, goes back and down like that. And this area right here is, you'll notice these 2 openings. I don't have to make them up. They're right here on the picture. Where's my pen? This one and this one. These are what we're going to be talking about. This elevation here is the same as this elevation right here. Because as I've said before, out of chaos, there is order. That is how I read this. Out of chaos, there is order. And what it's doing is we're going to be using, as I have always said, the oxygen, which is the gas coming out of here, is going to be fighting through these rocks to get out, as water is fighting to get in, because water goes down, gas goes up, gas goes up. Now they do it in such a way that this lip outside is going to be just just below this here, and the opening on the outside, which came up and goes across, which would have been over here, would make it so that water that comes in from here, no matter what happens, can never get over this lip because it can never, water doesn't go back up, okay? Water goes down, but it doesn't go back up. It will never achieve that lip to come down, and this is actually the off to the side is where the air will come out through here. And the water coming in here actually feeds in this corner at the lower level, which is the same elevation as this squiggle mark, and the openings so there's a guy who you can see him shoving the GoPro up into there to take the pictures. It's at this elevation. I'll kind of run this through you. This is where I hear you there. I hear you. Well, all right. That's because I got a phone call, had to jump out and jump back in, and I was trying to ask you if everything was okay before I proceeded. It's because I'm on my phone, I get phone calls, and you didn't like the other phone. I'll exit and come back into it. Am I okay now? Am I okay now? Am I okay now? Am I okay now? I can now. I totally can now. All right. As long as my image is correct, and well, I don't know how to correct that. To help me, Obi-Wan.
Angel, it was me. Sorry. I put myself on mute because I started to make a fag. I forgot I was muted.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So we're good to go again.
1 second.
And you can just edit that out.
That's it. Well, that's gone. Yes, we are. Oh, we're still recording anyway.
All right. That's fine. You can edit that out. All right. So you'll notice that the opening here, let me zoom in on this picture. The opening is actually right up here, and there are better pictures. It's this area here that you can kind of see there's an opening there. And what's going to happen is when we get to it, and you can hear me now and trust me later. I've said that the entry level of the water is at 82 feet. I now assume that 82 feet, if somebody would go out there with a cell phone with that shows their elevation and GPS thing and hold it right at this corner right here, I bet you that is going to be the exact same elevation as the spillway they like to call the tomb of the birds over here. Because again, when I show you how the system is working and these things all marry, I believe we can use this as a Rosetta Stone on how to read their communication. But even if you don't,
see the shape of that room there, can't you? In there.
well, the room is actually behind here. And that is where, when you look at the video at the link I sent you, you can see that the room is behind here and the floor level of the room is actually up here. And what is occurring, Karen, is the gas is coming up into this void, building up pressure, which will go up through those slots into this back room. It goes up through the slots here into this back room. This
Can I
back,
say something else? Was that
yes,
bricks we were looking at?
this one back here. When you say that brick, I need a little more
No,
reference.
just a minute ago when you were on the picture of the building.
Yes.
Is that bricks we're looking at in there, or is that rocks?
Well, what's the difference between a brick and a rock? What is the pyramid made out of? A bunch of rocks or a bunch of bricks?
Right. Okay, I was just asking. Carry on. Sorry.
Right. I'm just saying, how do you delineate?
Mm.
I think they were molded. Now, Chris Dunn will say they were chiseled and carved, but this here is the same as this here. These are synonymous. This is just a different picture, and then I blew it up in addition to it, so I can zoom in on it when I'm talking to people. But that's that back there. They're one and the same. I'm telling you, when it all is said and done, that this is communication. I'm going to kind of give you a little rhythm to it. You notice that this here and this here are going to be the floor line of this here and this here, because I'm suggesting to you communication. But let me show you how it's working. Water will be able to always come in through this opening, because this out here is underwater. We're going to put water level. Let me get blue. Blue, blue, blue. Water level is out here at that level of the chevron. We're going to work all our math off this being the water level. Okay, so it comes, fills through here. It'll actually fill through here and fill this back area. Well, this rock actually, if I draw it correctly, that rock would have to be up here because it has to deal with elevation. The water level will fill here, but can never exceed filling here because water can't go up. Okay? Now, the gas coming up here is going to be going through that valve into this room and then coming down and out. And by coming down and out, and the reason they have this in the rock is because the feet per square inch, they know exactly the calculation to have to allow this gas to build up enough pressure as it's coming up to push down to an elevation that they know exactly the elevation it's going to push down to, because it's going to go down to this elevation down here. When it's pushing from behind, it's going to build up enough pressure to push down to come through here and bubble out. That is your pressure switch de facto number one. And I'm not making any of this up. This is just rocket science 101. Pressures, water pressure per square inch, blah, 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 blah. As the pressure continues to increase in here, it's going to lower the water level in here. By lowering the water level, you're actually allowing more gas in because we're bringing the water table down, which will open up more of this opening. The opening is from there to here, and it's an opening. But as the water level recedes, more air comes out. Too much air, too much pressure is being made, more air has to escape. More air escapes, the pressure goes down, the water level goes up. The water level is inside of here and shorted to the outside pool. So the pressure and the actions in here of the water coming up and splashing through the puddle, or the air coming up and splashing through the puddle of water here, and the water that's actually in here working its way down into the system. Actually, I don't.
So that's the video you made, isn't it, with the air bubble thing?
Well, that was talking about the bottom. This down here is what I made with the air bubbler generating air here. What I was hoping to do, if I had made it really slow, where it was like a bubble every little bit, but the air pump I had didn't have a variable control, so it was either all on or all off. So I didn't have the control. If I made this a bigger structure, if I made it like a 3-foot long model, then the violence of the bubble wouldn't matter, because it's designed within the system that the violence of the bubble in here and in here are absorbed by the room until it settles out. But that that's the origin of the oxygen and how it bubbles into the room, settles out. And this actually winds up being a switch. But here, this pressure here, as the air pressure is getting higher, it's pushing down on this pool. The air pressure pushes down on this pool, opening more of the socket for air to come in. So this actually controls itself to maintain a air pressure that they are looking for. They have a goal, and I'm sure mathematically when we figure it out, because we know this is about 2 inches wide and this is about 1.5 feet in size, probably we'll figure out it's actually a cubit or something. But you know, we don't know. It may actually be a tar in length. You know, when we at this elevation, we will find out, and we will probably see that they are doing communication in the measurements that they have already established, because they are communicating through numbers. But we don't believe that until I can show you the pressures and show you what's happening, document it when I recreate a model. And the best thing about it is this I never could have conceived of in my own mind. I never would have thought of this as a separate device that's shorting to the pool outside, but allowing the air pressure that's coming up into the system pushing down, because as the air pressure happens, it's going to push down on this water, pushing it back out through the bottom and through that one little canal, pushing it down. As it pushes it down, lets more air in, lets more air up, chokes it off, creates more pressure, blah, 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 until it reaches a symmetry. Now, I'm going to suggest to you later that these two wells, as they are because later in the system, as we play with it all, and I have already suggested to you heavy water in here, the heavy water is going to be playing in balance with the weight of the water, and these pressures will change as the weight of the water and certain things occur within the system, that these elevations will make more sense in their symmetry with the water outside and the pressure bubbles that we're going to be playing with. And again, I didn't build this. They have pictures of it. I'm just explaining how I feel nature would work and how perfect this is, that it is a self-maintaining system. Now, you also, I believe, what is occurring in addition to the way that it maintains the water, the airflow out, because the water is coming in from here and going up to here, water is going to be coming out at the same way, and the air pressure is actually choking off the inflow of the water. And when it comes up, it's going to not only allow less air in, but more water into the system. Less air out of the system and more water into the system. And again, it is going to regulate itself based on the pressures that are in here, because everything all works in elevation because water finds its level. Now, I've been harping on this 82 feet, which, as I say, I believe is this elevation. I also believe it is outside the the third of the larger pyramids. You notice how there's markings on the front of it, how it's got the entryway and then a lower level here and a low level here, and then your entryway there. This is about 12 feet off the deck being 70. So that's 70 plus 12, 82 feet right there. And I'm going to tell you, these are the other pressures that we're going to be working with in the system, because again, they were communicating, only we are too stupid to comprehend it. Or we are a civilization in amnesia. We don't want to look for it. We don't comprehend it, but they left us the measurements. And again, if somebody takes their little cell phone and they on their way in, because you got to climb up the, where did I draw that drawing? You got to climb up. Yeah.
Angel, they can't admit it because what it is they've told us it's burial chambers, but
Right. Yeah, they
say
tell us
it's
it's
a
burial chambers.
machine.
They didn't know what a wheel was. They have no idea what hydrogen is. They have no idea what oxygen is. However, this whole system, the whole thing, it only works because they're separating hydrogen from oxygen, bringing the hydrogen to the top, burning it back together with the oxygen from here, and allowing it to come down through the system. As it comes down through the system, it's taking the static electricity, which is gathering on the surface of the structure to this very day because of the lack of the antenna on the top there, venting it off into the atmos plane, or whatever you want to call it, the ether up there. It's stunted from venting it off, both because of the 35th level where there's a larger step, and because of the way it has the swept design pushing the static electricity up to the upper area and then bringing it down through the system as this steam, which comes out of here like a, you picture a locomotive, steam engine. Steam is pumping up here, condensating at this higher elevation, grabbing the static electricity that it's born with and bringing that down through the system as it just turns into droplets, which turns into a little stream, which eventually turns into, a bigger stream, pools in that one hallway that they like to say was a thieves entrance. Come on, turn on. This hallway here pools. Get back to my picture. Dang it. No. Yes. It pools in that hole right there. When it comes down, he's holding a compact right there, and he's holding it. And actually what's happening is, you don't know it from this picture, but somebody in the King's Chamber is using one of those Radio Shack big flashlights from 1970 that it wasn't the million candle watt one, but it was pretty damn bright, shining a light into there, and he can see that light in this hallway. That hallway is here, proving that the light is shining into here, and he can see when he turned on and off the light. So these are connected. However, that was a test he did. Now, he thought it was a laser, but that's beside the point. The water comes down, pools into that hole, into that pool, and you see this whole wall is designed so that the condensation comes down the wall and pools. Now, this up here is the exact same elevation as this and this on the other side. So, and it's nice and squared, just like this and polished on the inside of it too. So you can't tell me it wasn't part of the tomb. Sorry, can't tell me it wasn't part of the pyramid, and that it was, done by tomb raiders. It was part of the system. It was built there. It's part of my model because it was part of it. I'm not making up a piece. I'm just telling you, whether or not I'm making it up, this is what nature would do. Pool, come down, pool in there, come down the center. When it hits here, it would just hit there, and eventually it would spill over and then come down into the bottom part where it wash, rinse, repeat. Now, we do this enough and enough and enough and enough and enough. We're going to be enriching the water to some of it to be what they like to call heavy water, more deuterium than hydrogen. And it just does that by nature. And I'm not saying that that's the only function they're looking from here. But if nothing else, that is what nature will do. And if we today say, oh, they were too stupid to think about anything else, if we just put a water wheel right there, we could allow that water wheel to just spin, and then we could put some magnets and, make some DC electricity. Although I think the electricity, you can't see it, but there's electricity bleeding throughout this whole thing. Nature, static electricity, nature wants the path of least resistance to ground. This whole system, as we play it out, is making a heavy pressure here, low pressure there. Within this system, and I erased it, they have a high pressure, and in this system they have a low pressure, and that's dictated because this right here again is 82 feet here, such that the water cannot, like you sucking on a straw, can't pull up the water table from the outside to spill over into the system. This system in here is at a negative pressure because it equalizes with this system through, as Chris Dunn points out, and I do believe to be true, that one guy, Gantenbrink, whatever, saw about a 30 gauge hole in the wall, put something through and realized it went. Well, that 30 gauge hole is all you need, just a little hole, so that the reactions in here have a way to vent the gas out. And I believe those gases were piped through the system and somewhere come into this third system. Where? I don't know, because it doesn't have to be a very big hole. The gases we're talking here are not like going to be flowing. They're kind of like just we're not talking about the, Nord Stream 1 pipeline here. We're just talking about like a simple flow of gas. This thing is designed to work over time, just letting nature go. They had time on their side. They thought in 500-year terms at minimum. So they weren't really too worried about something taking a long time. Anyway, in the system, a couple of things are occurring, and anyone who looks at it can recognize this. This back pressure is creating this water in here to be under pressure. no matter what you do, no matter how you say it. It's going to only reach an elevation here because in this room, you have two things. You have one hole, and this is where, looking at that room with a photograph, well, these are drawings, but they're on this web page you can get to at photos.greatgizapyramid.com. I've got lots of photos. You can look at these things by yourself of all the different areas and spots throughout the Giza Pyramid. We're looking right now is done by a guy named, what was his name? Steve, oh, dang it, his name is James Brown, something like that. I think it was James Brown. That guy right there. This guy in the late 90s got access to the system. Just like today, nowadays, they've almost reopened it where you can see there are people getting you got to grease the monkey, but they're getting areas of the structure are being explored that have never been explored since we've had decent photography. So hopefully we'll get real pictures from real people that aren't trying to tell you it doesn't matter. I don't care what they tell you, as long as I get real pictures. Pictures are all I need. I don't need people's words because I just picture what nature is doing throughout the system. Nature speaks for itself. Anyway, one of those conduits go up to the top. That's where the gas goes. It actually goes south and then up, and we can worry about the actual traversing of the gases because
Adrian, what do they want steam for?
well, steam condensates. Condensation will then run downhill. Eventually, no matter what you do, no matter how you string it, if there are a couple of girls out in the middle of a field and there was a spraying water and they're out there dancing in the water and getting wet in the mud and having fun, but that stream of water is working its way down towards an electrical power plant, what happens when that water hits the electrical power plant? Those girls ain't going to be dancing too much longer. No matter what you do, this stream of liquid born up here at this elevation, 240 feet in the air, comes down through the system, and it is a conduit to bring the static electricity with it. That is the conduit that taps the static electricity. So the steam is just part of the system. The steam creates the water creates a conduit. Now, no matter what you do, when on a day when you have static electricity and you touch that doorknob, the static electricity is going to equal out. You are going to get a spark. That is just nature 101. This whole system is designed to quarantine and tease the static electricity to go the direction it wants it to go, by bit by bit by bit, cutting off pieces until the static electricity, which is always going to find its way to ground, you are choking it off. One, by creating the pressure bubble here, creating an air gap between the system with up here and nature, the pool outside and anything outside the system. It is air gapping it from nature. So you basically have a big antenna in the sky that is not connected to ground. So nature's going to do what nature's going to do. If you let this water recede back up here, kill the bubble, then this connects to the pool outside and the static electricity will come down through the system that way. But we are purposely, as this creates pressure, choking it off and making it go the way we want it to go, or the way they wanted it to go, the way nature will make it go. Nature will do what nature will do. But you can see how, no matter what, this would choke the system from the outside world. This would create a pressure gap where more pressure allows more gas out and less water in. Less pressure allows more water in and less air out. It is self-regulating. I don't have to make it. It makes itself. And to be honest with you, the water spill, just in case somebody wants to try to look at it and say whatever, the water spill is actually right here. As the water level pushes down, it chokes it off. As the water level comes on, it actually spills from here. And you notice this elevation is actually going to line up with one of these. And so the water level has to exceed this point in order to get out. So that is one pressure bubble, and that is X number of foot-pounds. As the system builds up, the next choke point will be here, so it needs more foot-pounds in order to push its way out. And then the last step, it needs even more foot-pounds. And that is going to be based on, as we increase the density of the water in here, we are actually increasing the water table, raising the water table. And by raising the water table, it will actually raise the elevation of this water, because we are within the system, we are going to raise the water table. So remember how I said water can't go up? Well, water can go up if the water table within the system, we change the math of the water table within the system to mathematically make it go up. Because we are going to mess with nature. We're going to toy with Mother Earth. But nothing I'm saying can't be mathematically calculated. Whether you do it 32 inches per second, or 14 foot-pounds of pressure, or 9.8 meters per second of pressure, whatever you want to do, it all is a mathematical game. They're going to take the water that's at elevation up here, but the way the system works, when the water comes into this room, and as you know in your toilet, when the water comes in and it goes up and down through a little gauge there, it loses its water pressure. This water is no longer under pressure. This water is like a water in a cup. It is itself. The water's out here, it doesn't matter the pressure, because you break that pressure by making it go up and down and having an air bubble up here. When the pressure is enough, it's able to flow up and in, but this water isn't under pressure once it spills over. This water, since it's not under pressure, is easier to crack. As you know, in a pressure cooker, you can increase the temperature because it won't boil, because you're increasing its bond by putting it under pressure. You're changing the factors by putting it under pressure. This water, not under pressure, is easier to break into its respective gases because it's not under pressure. You see another feature that they took into of nature. The water coming out of here is statistically going to be heavier because of its flatness, and heavy water, when it doesn't like to be under pressure. It thinks it's at a higher elevation. It doesn't matter. We'll get into the creep factor later. The heavy water from there, well, at this point, if you wanted me to, I can continue the system because everything plays off of each other, where in the middle system, we already talked about how you have that center chamber down there. And again, where communication comes in, I got the little bubble down here. You look, you see a squarish over here coming down to a rectangle going down. If that doesn't look familiar, look in the room. This up top here is going to be shorted to this up here, and it's going to be the heavy water. It's going to be at an elevation that's only going to be about 3 inches lower. It doesn't have to, just a little bit. The water is going to flow down from there, just at elevation, into here, and it will actually fill this area. And again, because this water isn't under pressure, it's going to fill it to its same level, which would be here. And I realize it won't go any higher because it's broken the pressure bubble. But in here, when we're exuding a gas here, and it's going to flip-flop back and forth between oxygen and hydrogen, but just pick, we can do this with a bubbleator, just to play with things, just look at what nature would do. Oxygen comes into here. When it does that, it's going to add more foot-pounds of pressure onto this particular, the water in here. And just as that shape I showed you on the back wall suggests, as the foot-pounds go up, so does the foot-pounds per square inch. And I think that is echoed in that little shape there. You are increasing the foot-pounds per square inch. And as it's only going to go so far, though. It's only going to go down to about here, because when it goes down to about there, it's now cutting off. It is allowing its gas to then would transfer into here. But the way you got to look at the whole thing as a pressure over there, in fact, this is a perfect level. This comes into here. The gas itself can't ever get more because this pool and this pool are equalized. It can't exceed or put more water pressure down than this lip here. That's just physics gas 101 because it's got the opening that I said was the hydrogen on the other side. So no matter what it does, the gas pressure can't go any lower. But, and also by doing that, it loses the connection, the liquid between here and here. By doing that, that's going to be one of your switches for the energy, static electricity, stuff in nature, whatever, to actually switch the direction because it needs somewhere to go, and that's where it's going to start bleeding hydrogen. Now, hydrogen is going to work with this because, again, you're working with an air bubble. Now we're working with a hydrogen air bubble, and it's going to continue to build pressure because it has no problem building the pressure. Hydrogen has a different scenario, and hydrogen, its air bubble, its pressure thing is actually on the top side of this room. Going back to this room, you know how it's like the helping hands where need something to hold my phone, where the one hand and the other hand, they kind of interlock. And by doing that, the pressure bubble in here, the air can only push up so far. It can't push up any higher, but the hydrogen can push up to it can build back pressure even further because it's a separate gas and its vent is over here at a slightly lower elevation, so it's allowed to build more pressure. So you're instead of building foot-pounds in just air, you're also building foot-pounds in hydrogen. And I would love to know how these two gases are going to play together, if they're going to naturally combine, just if you put the two gases in a room, if naturally they would kind of, condensate together or whatever, or if they would remain their separate gases. But what I believe is the hydrogen is actually going to, what they call sublimate, absorb, dissolve into the water. And I think it's what causes remember how I suggested the inside of this structure was designed to collect precipitation. The way it's designed up top with its chamber is designed to collect precipitation, but because of how this water is under pressure, but the water is out here, they come into the system and they're not under pressure. In fact, they're allowed to spill over. They're enticed to spill over and flow down the system. The elevation there is very shallow, and the way that it's on an angle, there's no way a pool is out there. But because of the fact the entranceway is within the pool, that small 6-inch pool is then putting water pressure on top of this. So natural water is sitting on top of it. While this water in here, which is, I'm going to suggest to you, by any way you look at it, it is more heavy than the natural water on top, but is by proxy heavier than natural water because you're making it heavier and heavier. I believe what they're doing is enticing that water, probably by letting the hydrogen dissolve into it and then precipitation fall out of it. They are most likely somehow enriching the heavy water, or this is a compound that we do not to this day appreciate. But when we look at the math, the water in here, because of hydraulics, is going to be under pressure. But because of the spillway, the pressure would actually, if it was allowed to be a pool, the pool would be raised. It would probably be raised to the opening level of the same where the spillway spills in. But mathematically, the water can't get there because it's constantly spilling off. But mathematically, if it wasn't allowed to spill off, it would pool to that elevation. So the waters within the system are all compressed under pressure. Hydraulically, they are all under pressure, even though they are exposed to the ambient air. And I don't know exactly what that does to water, but I'm sure when I could get a physicist to actually sit down and take me seriously, when we look at the periodic table that is drawn out like little boxes, you got your hydrogen, but then you got your
Angel, can I ask you something?
yeah, yes,
Do
yeah.
you think when you see all that and you're explaining all that about the communication and how all that stuff, do you think they were extra specially advanced, or do you think that that's where they'd got to and it's a bit primitive to today, or they were far more advanced then?
Well, when we build a nuclear power plant on the outside of it, we don't reference markings on the inside. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that a nuclear power plant isn't taking into considerations exactly which way the electrons go and exactly what pressures are involved, because they're doing the same thing in a nuclear power plant at all times. They are taking into consideration the resident, ambient, frequency and force of every piece of it, which way are the electrons going to go, which way are the neutrons going to go. We put the controlling rods in to absorb the electrons. Otherwise, the reaction gets out of control. They're doing the exact same thing, only they're doing it with a different set of elements. The elements we're playing with here are hydrogen and oxygen. I believe we might have some nitrogen at play because there's 78% nitrogen in ambient air. However, that nitrogen, and this is where, until I actually kind of understand it, that nitrogen may vent out, but by average, more and more of it's going to come in. So we may have some ammonia at play here, or a derivative of there that we don't appreciate today. Maybe there's a way to make an ammonia that has an extra oxygen molecule, or that has an oxygen, because ammonia is nitrogen and 3 hydrogens. But at play here is also high oxygen. There may be a way in a higher static electric environment to create a compound that we today don't appreciate. And that compound, when exposed to ambient air, may break apart. And by breaking apart, it may release its energy within it. And that may be a power source that we don't appreciate, but they are taking the energy, using it to make a element in a specially controlled environment that's at lesser density, and then milking it out of the system on this side to be harvested. And I think this side is harvesting the liquid. This is harvesting the gas. And if you look at the room, the way it's designed, that it comes into there and then have a bezel below it and then goes down to the next level, that's because this is the natural ambient air pressure. And inside of here, the gas is under vacuum and the liquid is under pressure. So it needs not to be able to push its way up again to get to ambient level, because everything's going to try to find its level, but we've manufactured a pseudo level down here. And it's actually, if you notice, there's another opening in the wall that brings the liquid over to this side. It goes into the wall and then down. And by doing that, when this comes to full pressure, it actually chokes off that conduit. And that again is another switch. I don't know what it does. It may just start pumping out oxygen, or it may become neutral. It may just do nothing and allow what to occur is the energy to flow through the liquid as a whole to do something that I don't even yet appreciate, because I don't understand the elements and their bonding powers and what pressures they need to be at. Like, how many people out there know that you can't make ammonia unless you have a vacuum scenario, unless you do it on the microscopic scale like your garden does? But in order for us to do it in a commercial scale, we have to have it in a negative pressure environment. So it may be part of the scenario here. It may be part of the play. But this again is where I'd love to put it into a classroom scenario and just let it run. We may not get an ammonia compound because we may not hit the sweet spot of pressure and whatever. But we're still, no matter what you do, we're still going to get water. Nothing else this makes a really pretty waterfall. And if we expand it to the other one, we're also going to get where we may see some reaction in here we don't yet appreciate. And unless we actually have this some 100 feet into the air, we may not get the right condensation. You'll just get normal water condensation. Well, that's great. But over, in a classroom scenario, when you're making heavy water, if you have a glass of it, you're going to have so little in there, it's hard to test unless you do it for weeks. And even when we make heavy water, it takes weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to make a thimbleful. Kind of like uranium. You got to work at it for a long time to get a result. It's 1 in every 6,000 droplets. This may do it more efficiently. This may just do it in the background, like just having the water wheel spinning in the lake out there, and you don't realize that it's filling your batteries all day long. You don't think about it. It's just doing it. And you go out there and you put your bucket down and you pull out and say, hey, we got a little. I don't know how efficient it is. I know they had time on their hands, and I can see the system as a whole. I think it can be rebuilt in a classroom environment, if nothing else, just to see the pretty ways the water works. But in other ways, it's also a teaching tool. Well, if you appreciate it, it's a teaching tool. Otherwise, I don't know why anyone would have built it this way other than to do what I'm suggesting, because I'm not suggesting anything other than what nature would do. That's about all I have today. And thank you. We had our construction crew on now. You know exactly how and why I built it the way I built it and why I designed it the way I designed. Oh, I didn't design it. I found it that way. I've never actually been there. Luckily, I live vicariously through your photos, videos, and everything else. And you can find all that at photos.greatkeysatpyramid.com. I share photos and videos. You can find links to recommended viewing. You can find them at the youtube.greatkeysatpyramid.com under recommended viewing in my channels. There are lots of things. I think there's no way it can't do what I'm suggesting, because I'm not suggesting anything poppycock. I'm not.
Hey, Angel, every time I think that you told me quite a lot about the pyramid, although I have told you about that, I said it kind of looks a bit like a window, sort of. It's just how they would do a window frame with stone around it. It's not maybe a window, but it looks a bit sort of like one. And now you've brought it up in a hangout
Okay.
for something completely different that maybe you didn't see before or understand. Sorry, I went downstairs to get
Well,
a
I'll tell you,
coffee.
one thing I didn't understand. Like I said, since I've been fine tuning it and understanding more and more what they're doing it. And this is our sweet spot of elevations. All of our math kind of works from here. And we artificially bring the water table down to the lower level as far as pressures go, and everything finds, down here. Everything works together. But what I'm getting at is I could not have fathomed this for my life. I assumed that they did something with laying rocks on top of here to have a mathematical equation that would allow the air to come out and the water to come in, and it found perfect symmetry somehow. But this is better, to allow the air to come into here and dictate the pressure, and the pressure dictates the water flow to fill back into the system. And it's a great system. I could not have designed this better myself. But as you see, the only part that I have to add is putting the opening back closed right there, leaving a void here, and or there could be loose rock. It doesn't matter, because all it has to do is gases have to come out and water has to come in, and this maintains the pressure. It's self-regulating. And as we talk about the pressures and we talk about the different phases, as this adds pressure here, I'm sure that's probably tiny bit in the whole, like, wings on the butterfly affect something over in China bit, where when you add the pressure here, it's also adding water. Things may work out. Oh, and you remember how I said the hydrogen, once here, it switches from oxygen to hydrogen and lowers the water to pushes the water down with hydrogen, pushes the water level down, more hydrogen. I think this and its pressures are actually going to work in symmetry and be affected because it's all one system by over here. And the hydrogen may pressure wise echo through the system more than the oxygen echoing through the system, at least in this area. But again, this is where once I have it built and I can play and toy with pieces, I will get an even better understanding because it will show me what it's doing. I can take the guesswork out of it because it will show us what it's doing. Now,
Yes.
when we want to expand out of it, the pool outside of here is shorted to the Osiris shaft. The only spot to this day goes still down to the water table. This is the true short. This water here is going to be a trickling water down. It's not going to be a flowing water. It's going to be a little bit faster than the speed of the water coming down here because it's actually outside the system and free. But it'll come down and it's in a controlled environment. When it gets down to the bottom here, you notice that spillway. You can look at pictures of it. It allows the liquid to get in there. It's riding at something about a meter long, about a cubit long, about a cubit wide, and we can probably lay it out and it will probably somehow mathematically tell us something. But they want a controlled spill from the elevation up there, which starts just above the lip of the spillway here. So it's controlled. The water here is always going to be at a water pressure. I got my finger in the wrong spot. The waters in here are going to be at a higher elevation than the waters over here. That is so this water is enticed to go down this way. I'll suggest to you heavy water, which has its creep factor, and the fact that this is flowing down slowly is going to entice the heavy water to want to come over to here to get down to a lower elevation. And this is also a big ground. All the heavy water wants to is get to a area of where it can settle. I'm going to suggest to you now, the way I think about heavy water is if you have a bucket, the heavy water, the deuterium water, inside of the hydrogen water, the normal water, it is going to evaporate into the hydrogen water. And then if this was put into a bigger bucket of hydrogen water, it's going to, as soon as you allow this water to join there, it's going to evaporate into the hydrogen water and then condensate at the lower elevation. Now, this won't happen if this is a vacuum because it's not actually condensating at the lower elevation. It's condensating at the as far as pressures go, where it can settle. If you put this under a vacuum, I think we will find that the heavy water will most likely actually, since it's the inverse, it will most likely come to the top, skim to the top, which I believe is why this pulls off of here at the higher elevation, because this is under pressure, allowing the water to the heavy water to trick itself into condensating up here. And it's actually the heavy water that we want up here because the heavy water is going to have the higher percentage of deuterium. So when this hydrogen gas is coming out, it's actually going to be a higher and higher and higher percentage of deuterium gas. So when it's being burnt back to here, it's going to be a higher and higher and higher percentage of heavy water / deuterium water, which will come down, which will fill this pool and spill over, wash, rinse, repeat. So they are doing everything they can do to increase force multiply or enhance the system to get the reaction they want, which is more and more denser heavy water by playing with the known features, known characteristics of nature and how it plays with itself. I didn't say that right. How nature reacts to normal environment. If I'm wrong about any of my understandings of water and heavy water and how it would react in nature, I would love someone to say, no, you're wrong. It would do this. Because as soon as they say, no, you're wrong, it would do this, I will probably understand another feature, another piece, or another part of the structure that I didn't understand why it's there because I yet didn't have enough knowledge about water in all of its characteristics. But nothing in here was by mistake. Nothing in here is unfinished. Nothing in here, I don't have to come up with weird, off the wall suggestions. I'm just pointing out what nature would do, how nature works in spillways. We have this in our toilet all the time. There's nothing special about what I'm saying, that if somebody actually looked at this as a Halliburton-sized project, they wouldn't come to the same realization. But if they look at it and they are blinded by a tomb, they will never see what I'm showing you. If they're blinded by, if they look at this and I show you this system and I build it and show you the whole thing, but I never tell you anything about the tombs. In fact, my favorite person is someone who's never been there, knows nothing about it, didn't read anything about kings or, pharaohs or any of that garbage, because then their mind isn't already tainted. This is a science project. This is beautiful. This shows a level of knowledge that we didn't even know until the past 100 years. Heavy water is relatively new to us, and it may still show us a compound or derivative of an element like helium-3 or something of that nature, or a compound like nitrogen with oxygen
Angel's only got
encapsulated
a
in.
couple of minutes left now.
Okay, well, if you have any questions, I'm very easy to find. Just don't ask me anything that starts with "why did the king?" I'll hang up on you. There's my phone number if you're in the States, 657-229 Giza. You can text message that from Europe and stuff like that. I got WhatsApp and stuff. If you text message that number on WhatsApp, this little phone right here buzzes. GreatGizaPyramid.com. I make it as difficult as possible to find all these pictures. You can go to photos.greatgizapyramid.com. I have my whiteboard things. You can go to files.greatgizapyramid.com. Half a dozen stuff like this. If you don't believe me, you go to surface.greatgizapyramid.com. Don't go to giza.ws. I'm losing that website. Go to greatgizapyramid.com. But I think this, once recognized, should be a teaching school. This teaches so much stuff. Of course, they don't want people to be intelligent. They want you to have 18 pronouns and not even comprehend how to tell time.
But they didn't know about you, did they?
No, they didn't. I was sent here for a reason. I was allowed to culminate this knowledge for a reason. This time in existence is the perfect time because I live vicariously through other people's photos and videos. Thank God people made really boring videos of them walking through the Great Giza Pyramid, because it got a chance for me to see areas that are not on the tour, areas that gave me what initially I said was confirmation bias. At this point, it's evidence. I'm beyond confirmation bias. The machine tells me what it's doing. It shows you in its iconry what it's doing. It marries what I suggest the machine would be doing. And I'm suggesting to you that the communication, once we confirm this is what the machine is doing, the iconry is communication that we have long since dismissed because the same reason that we are so stupid we don't have a meter being a meter long and we
We've
can't
got to say goodbye,
correct
Angel.
ourselves.
We've got to say
Goodbye,
goodbye.
Karen. Thank you for giving me the time.
Oh no, it's a pleasure. Has the minute come up on your phone yet?
I don't know.
It's going to in a moment because I've been recording for 58 minutes and I can't remember how
It's
into the
fine.
video we. Thank you so much for your time and your brilliant mind.
You have a great day, Karen.
Yeah, should we just talk off air for a moment? But thank you so much.
Totally.
You'd like to stop time and talk, wouldn't you?
Oh, I'd love to. But you got to go see your man.
Yeah. Anyway, well, it's going to finish in a moment, so yeah. But thank you so much, Angel. I very much enjoyed that.
And I honestly think your audience is the most willing to accept the information, because most people won't. They're not willing to even to stop and think about it.
Yeah.
Especially time, because they're not going to believe that. Well, I don't know what they believe. You have to think like not Bren Forrester. You have to think like him too. But I was going to say like Hancock, where we are a civilization in amnesia.
Yeah. Until people like you come along. And anyway, thank you so much. I don't know why it hasn't cut off already, but it's going to cut off any moment. Thank you so much. Love you lots. Thank you, everybody that watched the videos. Thank you, Angel.
All right. You want me to just call you on Facebook?
Yeah, let's go on Facebook. I'm just going to shut off now.